Hello there, ladies, gents, and non-binary ents. I was wondering when you would show up. Welcome to my channel, where I share everything that I find interesting. Before we get started, I have a warning. This video includes depictions and discussion of blood, death, and gore. It is not too detailed, explicit, or extreme, but please be aware going forward. If you are extra sensitive, please click away, and I'll perhaps see you next time. Thank you for your time. Now, I am a big fan of horror, and I, along with many others, adore Pokemon. What could be better than combining the two? I decided to start with the Gardevoir line of evolution. Yes, I was terrified to search up references. Yes, I did find cursed images I never wanted to see. So you may be wondering, why did a fool like me decide to start with Gardevoir? Well, partially because Gardevoir is somewhat humanoid. My specialty as an artist focuses a lot on the human figure and character design, and it just tends to be something I'm much more comfortable with. Additionally, Gardevoir is one of my favorite Pokemon, and I thought it would be perfect fit for my inspiration, which I will expand more on later. I'd like to introduce you to my design for the Gardevoir line and the ideas behind it. I began my design with the cutesy Ralts, and I really enjoyed this process. I started off with a drawing of Ralts as I brainstormed and started to form an idea in my head. I added only slightly gruesome elements and leaned a lot into a baby vampire type design. I meant for this form to stay somewhat cute, but the teeth reveal a bit more than what the observer may have bargained for. Moving on to Kirlia, I actually had some trouble designing this Pokemon, because I wanted it to be a real middle ground between the two evolutions. I really wanted to push my vampire angle, but I couldn't go overboard, because Kirlia's not the final evolution, of course. I set aside a few of my ideas for later, and eventually settled on a reiteration of the fangs and somewhat insane dark eyes. Kirlia and Ralts come across as somewhat less involved, more of a secondary scavenger than anything else, even though I later give Kirlia sharp claws for dismembering foes. I thought it only appropriate that I attempt to pull out all the stops when it came to the final evolution, Gardevoir. A Pokemon initially only terrifying because of what the fanbase has done to it. Absolutely horrifying. Believe me when I tell you. Even Safe Search is not safe. Don't believe the lies. It's not worth it. Here's where I took a couple of liberties with Gardevoir's design, and I will freely admit that. It's not really clear as to what's on Gardevoir's head. Is that hair? I don't know, but I ran with it anyway. As I was in this process, I recalled hearing about the legend of Elizabeth Bathory, a Hungarian noblewoman from the later half of the 16th century. She quite possibly inspired the story of Dracula, and was thought to kill up to hundreds of girls and young women in the late 1500s and early 1600s. She was thought to have vampiric tendencies, by which I mean she supposedly bathed in blood to preserve her youth. Ridiculous quantities of blood are simultaneously necessary for that, so although I give some credit to the stories of her abuses of her staff, I find the literally bathing in blood angle to be a little difficult to swallow. Some believe that the accusations were, at its core, a farce, a spectacle made primarily to take away the influence and reach of the Bathory family, to discredit and usurp their power. I'm sure you can see where I'm going with this. A bloody countess, thought to be a vampire. The story of Elizabeth Bathory ultimately inspired me to start this project. So I further pushed the vampire angle, giving Gardevoir an entirely deranged expression, and at some point, go back and give Gardevoir long clawed fingers, quite contrary to the original serene design. Even though I don't exactly believe the bathing in blood concept, mostly because blood congeals quite quickly, I really wanted it to seem like Gardevoir might bathe in blood, somewhat like the legends of Elizabeth Bathory say. Something I found really tricky about this was the fact that the environment and atmosphere was really hard to pin down correctly. With something corporeal and spooky, I struggled to make everything match and put it all together in a cohesive way. But at the end, I managed to put somewhat of a filter over everything and gave it the looming, impending sense of danger that I feel it really needed. Elizabeth Bathory's story is one I really love because it reminds me of a tragic fall from grace. A countess with practically anything she wants at her disposal, with maids and servants to clean up after her, with power and wealth and a castle to grow up in, she still took to violence to solve her issues. Nothing could be enough for her. She delighted in bloodshed. Her cruelty is suspected to have stemmed from her father's cruelty, and although her actions are irredeemable, it provokes a morbid kind of self-reflection. Though her story is quite antiquated, when applied to modernity, I think there is much to consider about humanity's darkest responses to pain and hurt. And this is the end result. I hope I can do another one of these in the future. These kinds of videos are really draining on my time, but hopefully I'll be able to cut it down as I get better at editing. I hope you all enjoyed, and thank you for sticking through it all if you're still listening. I hope to see you next time.